You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I am quite pleased to have Ilya Popenko on the show. Ilya, welcome on to Something Rather Than Nothing.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I encountered some of your solo music after, and of course you front the band Mad Meg, which I've been enjoying your music. You're pretty, you do a lot of things artistically, and one of the things I noticed too was your incredible photography. But I wanted to start with that and just hear about taking photos and your time in New York City. I noticed the photography, and it was just great portraiture and depiction of folks in the city. Can you talk about your photography and your time in New York City and doing photography?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I went to school here for photography. I went to Pratt, and my degree is specifically in photography, and I've been that. I mean, and it's how I make money. I'm doing like video work and commercial photography as well. And yeah, I mean, I've been kind of lately. I've been doing photography only for work. I've been transitioning more into film. So I recently shot a feature documentary, which I'm taking to different festivals right now. And I shot a short narrative film. I still do photography, but it's kind of, it's not, uh, it doesn't take prevalence right now.
Tell me about your music and Mad Meg. I I really loved the music. And I know it's kind of difficult to describe the kind of wild mix. I love the energy in it, and also you doing some under your name, Ilya Popenko. Doing some solo release. As far as music goes, what's been happening recently with your work there?
Well, Mad Meg is on a little bit of hiatus right now. Um, our our drummer quit, and then our bassist was facing some legal issues. So hopefully he'll come around eventually. Uh, so we're kind of been regrouping and resting for the past year or so. So meanwhile, I've been like recording stuff by myself at home, and but not playing live. But recording at home, it kind of gives you a certain freedom. You don't have to really like compromise with anyone. You get more of a chance to experiment because you're just by yourself and you can use like whatever instruments that are available. And it's much faster than working with a band because band is like a huge machine that has a lot of like components to it.
Yeah.
And but I do, of course, miss playing live, and I do, of course, miss collaborating with other musicians. And hopefully, we're gonna get back to it. But as for now, we're taking a little break.
Yeah, I love the horses, not mine. I love the vocal. I love your vocals.
Thank you.
There's this great immediacy to your voice. I really enjoy that. Tell the listeners a bit about touring with Mad Meg. I know you have. Uh, some touring in Eastern Europe, Russia, and in the area. And what was? I mean, your music's so wild. And what were those shows like? I mean, I know even one spot you had played maybe multiple times in a prison. What's the Mad Meg tour, or what was some of those
Mhm.
experiences like?
No, that was definitely one of the funnest experience of my life. That particular tour that we went on, it was uh, about 25 cities, I think, maybe a little more. And we started in the Baltic states, the Baltic countries like the Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and then we flew to Russia and then made it all the way to Siberia and then south of Russia and came back to Moscow. And that was before the war, of course. And the experience is different because we're more popular in like bigger cities. So Moscow, St. Petersburg would have like more people, or some other larger cities. Some smaller ones, would maybe like struggle to fill the room, but it was still fun because we've encountered some crazy characters on the road. And yeah, the prison show that you're talking about is a female prison in Lithuania. I think that was our first stop on the tour, on that Eastern European tour, and our promoter, uh, like the venue canceled the show like last minute, and our promoter is like, "Do you want to play a show in a female prison?" And we're like, "Sure."
Yeah.
And we had to hire like a sound engineer to do sound for that, and we also hired him to record, and that ended up being like a live album. And yeah, it was definitely a weird experience, having to go into that prison and sort of like sing for those inmates, like the majority of whom, like they either like killed their husbands or they were involved in like drug trade or
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
domestic violence or drug related charges.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. As a quick and easy transition here, Ilya, you work in a lot of art. You work in a lot of forms, in creativity and art. I wanted to ask you for yourself, as far as identity. Were you? I mean, were you born an artist, or were you creating, say, music or doing photography, and you're like, shit, I'm an artist. This is what I do. Was there a moment like that for you?
yeah, well, I was born in a family of artists. My mom was a painter, and my dad is an illustrator. He he used to do, like, when he worked, he did storyboards for TV commercials. So I was kind of like predestined to be involved in the art somehow. And you know how, like, when I was growing up, like I had never met a person who was not an artist until I was like 16 or
Oh,
something,
wow, really?
because
Yeah.
like all of their like social circle, they were either artists or writers or something. So for me, like, to see people who work actual jobs, it was like fascinating. I'm like, what, you can like add, you can do math, or you can like do something, computer program. That's so fascinating. But I'm not really good at like just studying, so I kind of
Yeah.
like uh, rolled with the arts thing. And I started out as a fine artist. When I went to college, I kind of like did painting and stuff, and then I realized that doing photography is something that I like much better. And by that time, I had been already doing photography since I was 13. I sort of built my own darkroom in my bathroom, and I was like developing my own pictures since I was 13. And like and also I was like dabbling with writing songs since I was 13, so that kind of was a parallel thing. And also once I was in college, I took some film courses, and that kind of like introduced me to filmmaking as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I was a big fan of Tarkovsky, Russian
Yeah,
filmmaker.
I hate the fucker.
Do you tell me about your responses to Tarkovsky?
Nah, I mean, he's all right. I'm exaggerating, of course. It just seems that he's a little like self-indulgent and narcissistic, and he, he sacrifices the actual filmmaking for like some egotistic reasons. He's like, oh, look at me, I'm so fascinating, I'm gonna shoot like running water for like 10 minutes. it's
Yeah.
it's something like similar a feeling that I get from like Jodorowsky films,
Heck
which
yeah.
and they're pretty, they're pretty and inventive and everything, but I still can't rid of the fact that he does it only for like shock value. There is
I yeah.
like the audience is not in like his main priority. Although Tarkovsky's first two films, which is Ivanov's Childhood and Andrei Rublev, they were kind of a little better because it was more about actual filmmaking rather than like showing off
Yeah, I
his
mean,
his symbolism.
yeah, I see a point, and definitely seeing with Andrei Rublev and Ron's childhood, but especially Rublev, more poetic, more extended storytelling. As opposed, and the Jodorowsky reference to you as far as that critique, I've had that reaction to Jodorowsky. Yeah, I've also had that reaction to another film favorite from folks, Ken Russell. People adore Ken Russell. I like some Ken Russell, but I find that same characteristic at times with filmmakers really spending a lot of time what seems to be like in their mind, so um I was wondering, Ilya, as far as talking about art and you being an artist, what is art? What is for you? What is art?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard like different interpretations from different artists or different people. For me, it's sort of like a language to communicate with the world because not everything can be expressed verbally. Uh, and plus, I'm not a very verbal person in general. So there are other languages besides verbal language to sort of communicate your feelings that, like, you cannot put certain stuff in words. So you find other ways, be it music, poetry, or visual arts. Um, you sort of try to rid of certain things in your soul to be poetic, or like in your mind, and kind of um, communicate it to other people. And it's also, it's a like a fascinating thing where something comes out of nothing. I guess it's like that in every profession, but it's more pronounced in art. Like you don't have anything, right? And then all of a sudden you build something and it becomes something like having a child. It's such a fascinating process, like a birth of just like a human being out of another human being. Like, who does that?
Yeah,
it's
right.
it's pretty magical, and so is art, and especially uh like with art, it's not like you don't. I mean, some people do, but like I personally don't plan everything out. Like everything that I end up with is usually not something I intended. So it's also interesting to see how it comes out. It's sort of like you put a seed in there and you see how it grows, and that process is also pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah. If part of my background, I been very influenced by Russian literature and history, 20th century, 19th century, particular Russian literature, and some of the surreal writers, Bulgakov, a favorite of mine, Gogol. As far as in the background literature, has it been an influence upon you in your work with the kind of Russian writers, Russian literature?
Yeah, of course, to a degree. Like Russians are generally a very literature inclined nation. Like they're not very visual. They're like more into literature, and like all of those classics like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, we were made to read them like at such an early age that like I don't know what, like you're 11 or something and you're reading a War and Peace,
Yeah.
and I don't know how much of it you can really understand. And
Yeah, yeah.
because I usually hated school, it was hard for me to love those particular writers, but I do love Dostoevsky a lot, and it was not taught in Soviet schools, so that's why I like him, and mystical realism
Sure.
uh, with a grain of humor. That is something that's very close to me, and something that I really kind of like translates in what I do.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate your comments there. What about the role of art? What's art supposed to be doing, in your opinion? You know, whether you're making music or, you're doing a documentary. You're creating something. What do you think the role of art is, generally? But for you in creating.
Um, I I don't know if it's like I'm gonna run with this thought, but it might not make sense at the end because like I kind of always felt that art is supposed to be purposeless. Like once it has a purpose, it stops being art. Like if it has, like if you try to persuade people one way or another, that becomes like propaganda, right? And not art. Once like you're trying to sell a product, that becomes like design. So as long as you keep that purposeless purity, like to me, that's art. And when like people say artists are supposed to, bring this and that, or like make a world a better place, I'm like, fuck off.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like I'm not responsible for you bitches.
Yeah, yeah. There was this part about, I've always been the provocative statements around the relationship to the audience, right? And hearing artists say, "Hey, look, I'm making this and I'm putting it out there. It's a manifestation of me, and there might not necessarily be all this profound stuff or meaning. It's supposed to come at you. It's supposed to hit you like that. And one of the things about your answer about like moving towards meaning is that's where a lot of the answers I have, like, they seem to move towards, is like what's the deeper meaning of this. But there's also this bit, I think, is something that comes from the manifestation of the artist's mind to appear disrupt. I see disruptive elements in what you do, both in like sound and thought, and like provocative. And I really love that piece of it. It's not the first thing I think a lot of people go towards. But that's what I think's interesting about the question. Some people have the art piece of being like, hey, I just want this copacetic relationship, me and the object. And for others, particularly with music, it's that there's this disruptive, that there's something janky about that. And I've seen that in your work. And I really enjoy that, because for me, that's when my thinking starts, is when there's the disruption. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on like the personality of an artist. If like some people like to make like smooth music and they want to make their listener comfortable, like my musical more desperate, and then it's sort of like a scream for help in a way.
Provocative. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's yeah, you kind of want to do something like contrarian to uh, whatever is the status quo, just to um, like shake things up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask you the big question too. You did mention aspects of it with the what is art, but why is there something rather than nothing?
Mm, well, So that's like an abstract question. It's not.
Yeah,
It doesn't like relate to
yeah.
anything. Uh, well, who's to say that? Maybe we're creating nothing. Like maybe the world is filled with something, and we're trying to like make a room of nothingness in it.
I like, I like that. I wanted to ask you about I was starting with talking about photography, and you mentioned working more on film and documentary film. What's that process been like for you, moving from the stills to creating, that more full narrative in film?
It's very difficult for uh, still photographers, and even like the most famous one who started moving towards moving images, like David LaChapelle, who is a phenomenal photographer, and he started making music videos. And it's hard for still photographers to think in terms of like story and to think in terms of like that fourth dimension, which is time. Uh, and so they become a little stiff, those videos. Or like Anton Corbijn, also a famous photographer who started doing music videos, and they're a little boring because there is no story. And I have the same problem, because as a photographer you sort of find your frame and you think your job is done. You're like, okay, I'm ready to go home.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and that's where the filmmaker job just starts. You find the frame, and then you have to tell a story. And like for me, that's a little foreign. But I'm kind of excited to investigate that aspect and sort of like learn a little more about it.
yeah. As mentioned in Corbine, I think about some work with Depeche Mode and the singular visual. I think you saying that I really picked up on that, kind of like hovering around the single, visual to set the mood. I think it works. Well, I want to call him just a photographer, but Derek Jarman working with the Smiths, filmmaker, still photographer. That interplay of music and sound. When you were filming, when you're doing more of the filming, and you thinking in your brain about sound and such, was that a big part? Do you hear that as far as when you're filming, any sound back around it? You're very much focused on the visual capture.
I like the if you're talking about film,
Yeah.
not like music videos. Well, the latest, like the feature documentary that I shot, it's about a musician, so there's a lot of his music in the film. But I also have a friend who is she's a musician who writes a composer who writes music for films and like theater shows. So she just opened her whole catalog to me. So I've been using just her music for everything because it's the type of music that just works with everything else. And of course, it's really interesting how music can change the scene completely. Or like the scene might not work, and you just throw music in there, and it's like all of a sudden it glues everything together.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've quite quite amazing and thanks for the feedback from like behind the camera too. It's interesting because I uh th- hearing about the differences between, like you said, trying to maybe more capture the singular image or mood that way, and kind of a full film. Ilya, I wanted to ask you so you can let the listeners know as far as where to find your material. I know you could find the music, say, on Spotify and such, but where can folks find about your photography and about the art that you put out?
Yeah, well, I have a like a big presence. Like I have a bunch of websites. So for Mad Meg music, it's Mad Meg on Spotify and all the Apple Music and stuff. My solo stuff is Ilya Popenko, also on like Spotify and all that. Um, our Instagram pages are at Mad Meg the band, I think, or Mad Meg band, but I think that would be like the search would show it to you. My personal Instagram is at definitely not Ilya Popenko. With underscores. My photography website is ilyapopenko.com. My commercial photography is popenkophoto.com. I'm already tired listing everything. And, my Facebook is Ilya Popenko. So, yeah, I think that wraps it up. And, and YouTube. Yeah, I have, uh, also you can find us on YouTube, and it's, like Mad Meg, if you search for it, or Ilya Popenko, that will eventually land you on that our YouTube channel.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Ilya, I want to thank you. I I really appreciate really dig on your music, the Mad
Thank you.
Mag, and
Thanks.
then your solo. I mean, and I really mean that too. I love your singular voice within that. Has an immediacy to it. Really enjoy that track, and everybody too. Check out photography, Ilya's photography, and other material coming out. Really great to catch up with, to meet you and catch up with you. And
Thanks, Tim.
appreciate what you make. And everybody check out Ilya Popenko, Mad Meg. I recommend going to Mad Meg, and whether it's on Spotify, and checking out the great, very unique, and I don't know, people say unique music, but I like the mix. I love the mix that you have in your music, and just wanted to thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ken. It was definitely fun. And like, if you go to our YouTube channel, it's populated with all kinds of stuff, with my solo videos, with like more produced music videos of Mad Mag. So there's like definitely a big variety of stuff that you can watch, and I think it's a pretty fun channel.
It is a
follow.
fun channel.
Yeah, but yeah, thanks so much
Ilya.
for inviting me here.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And got Ilya from New York City, something rather than nothing, based in Oregon, doing the coast to coast. Great pleasure to meet you, Ilya. Great luck with your art, and everybody check out Ilya Popenko, Mad Meg, and I'll have links in the show notes. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken.
What it's like being you, I have no fucking clue. Can I try on for size, looking right through your eyes, looking out of your eyes? And I am not me, and the horse is not mine. Not me, and the horse is not mine. What's the scope of your view? I have no fucking clue. Do you see me at all, or am I just a fly on your wall? And I am not me, and the horse is not mine. I am not me, and the horse is not mine. What is it like being you? I have no fucking clue. Try on for size, looking once through your eyes, looking twice through your eyes. All the things that you say, they will never convey what it's like inside there. Though we breathe the same air, though we breathe the same. I am not me, and the horse is not mine. I am not me,
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.